Hey, songwriters, welcome back to At Home Songwriting. This is an At Home Songwriting live stream chat. We're broadcasting on YouTube, on the At Home Songwriting YouTube. We're also on the Doyle Turner YouTube this morning because our guest this morning is singer, songwriter, and just busy guy Doyle Turner. So we're going to have fun talking to him about his music and what he's been up to. He's got some gigs on the way, some new music that's coming. He's got music that's already out there. So if you have any questions that you want to ask, put them in the chat and we'll get to those questions as we go throughout the morning. But we're really just going to have a nice kind of laid back morning about talking about songwriting with Doyle Turner. So he's been on the channel before. So Doyle, welcome back to At Home Songwriting.
Oh, thanks for having me, Chad. This is a real pleasure to visit with you again.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for doing this. I see the nice snowy background for you up there in Bemidji this morning. So is it warming up there yet?
Oh my gosh. And the sun is so powerful that all the south-facing banks are brown. The snow's melted off. So spring is coming.
Awesome. Finally, for those of you who are not in Minnesota, we have been through a long snowy winter this year. So
Yeah. And more so you in the Twin Cities. I'm up in Bemidji and we've watched all of those big storms race through and go south and we've just felt nothing but gentle compassion for you.
well, thank you. Thank you. Well, yeah. Well, welcome back to the channel. I know that you and I have talked before. So, if people want to see kind of your background and stuff like that, there's other videos they can watch. But this morning, I just kind of wanted to chit chat about songwriting and open it up to people that might be watching that have questions, for somebody like you that's out there doing it, writing songs, releasing music, doing gigs. You're a true independent artist, and I think that's really cool.
Yeah, it's kind of fun to hear people talk about getting signed to a record label. And I've heard nothing but I feel nothing but like, no, I don't want that. I love my independence. I love being able to make every decision myself, even though it can be kind of overwhelming when all of those decisions are coming at you as you work up to a release or you work up to recording some of what you've written. It does seem overwhelming, but I've gotten more used to having a lot of pots on the stove that are simmering. And so I can, pull off a cover and check and stir a little bit and taste and just have a lot of things on the stove. And that's I feel like one of the main things that has helped me to grow is I can have a lot of things happening at the same time, and that's great. A great part of being independent.
So what has been going on for you lately?
I have this little song that's going to come out as a single on Monday called "Run a Little Faster." And it was co-written with Dave Novak, and he ended up doing a lot of the production. And then our friend Sarah Morris is on it with some harmonies.
Cool.
And this little song has been the little song that could, because I'm a sticky note person. If I turn my camera around, you'd laugh because it's nothing but sticky notes. And this little sticky note on the side of my monitor here, it says, run a little faster, ship it, which is Seth Godin speak for get your stuff out, right? Finish
Yeah.
it, get it out. And so that's been there for so long, it's faded and the little scribbles are all over it. And so it's a big, big deal for us to get this going on Monday. And it's going to be premiered on my local radio station, which is kind of cool. And yeah, so
Awesome.
I'm very excited about that. And then my friend Ted Heineshevitz and I, who you know and you've worked with,
Yeah.
he and I have a duo called the International Treasures, and we've been busy. We finished recording. We're now in the mixing, almost to mastering phase of that of the new album that'll come
Sweet.
out in September. And
Awesome.
so that's been exciting because I mean, you know how it is when you get something almost there. You're so excited about every note, and you want to make it right. And in fact, when I'm done here, I'm heading over to Supple Studios, and we're gonna do a little more mixing.
Awesome.
Um, and then, like you said, we've got some really exciting live gigs coming up for the Minneapolis area. The next Thursday, we're going to open for Amanda B. Perry at the Astor. And then we're going to, in April, have two big gigs that are multi-bill gigs. One at Dusty's Bar on the 20th, and on the 27th, and then one at Bryant Lake Bowl on the 20th. So
Awesome. Bryant Lake Bowl is such a cool place. Have you played there before?
I've never played there before. This is all new to me. You know, you talk about all these things that are happening for me, and I'm relatively new to all of this. If you go back 5 years, I'm the person who's struggling to get the songs and the melody, the words and the melodies to match, and
Yeah.
sweating every detail. And so it's all been a rapid growth for me.
Yeah, and I know we have a lot of people that watch from outside of Minnesota, but Bryant Lake Bowl is kind of a little, it's like a bowling alley slash bar, restaurant slash performing arts place that's in uptown Minneapolis. And then, as you mentioned, you're performing with Amanda B. Perry at the Astor Cafe, which is a super cool music and food venue in Minneapolis as well. So anybody that's in the city should definitely check it out. But also Amanda B. Perry, she's been on the channel before. Like, talk about a voice, man.
Yeah. She is a true amazement of the Twin Cities area, and so just to be able to be, on that same stage with her, we're going to do a song with her as part of that of that show, and to be on that stage with her is going to be fantastic. She's kind of like Cher in a lot of ways with the power of her voice,
Yeah.
and her songwriting is just. She and I started songwriting, kind of publicly songwriting with the Singer Songwriter Challenge at about the same time. So we always feel like we're the same, year class. We
Yeah.
started out with that group at the same time, and it's just been fun to have a colleague like that, somebody that I've co-written with before, and she's an amazement.
So there's a comment in the chat from Roy. He says, proud of you.
Oh, thank you, Roy. Thank you so much.
um, so let's go back to Run a Little Faster. Are you talking to me about like, should I be out there running or what? What's that song about?
Well, that was a co-write with Dave Novak, and he he and I had planned to co-write at a certain time, and he ended up texting me something, and he said, "I've got this melody hook that keeps waking me up in the middle of the night." And I said, "Oh yes, here we go." And it's all about the story of the song is, star-crossed love.
Mm,
He said stay or daddy said leave, and it goes from there where they're taking off together to chase their love, and so it's kind of like people have said that it could be a movie car chase type of scene, and that's what it feels.
cool.
And it's really fun because that song has gotten some legs that I haven't, that some of my other stuff hasn't gotten. As part of the Midwest Country Music Organization, they picked it up and they're running it as part of their original show that's on like a 30 station network around the Minnesota, South Dakota, North Dakota, Wisconsin, and Iowa.
Awesome.
So I met with the station manager for the local FM radio station here, and he sent it off to a programmer in South Carolina that a lot of radio stations use. And he said, "Hey, maybe you want to put this into the rotation." And I'm like, "What?"
What do you think's different with
I
that
think
song?
it probably fits more commercial country than a
Okay.
lot of my other stuff.
Okay.
Um, Dave Novak is a fantastic guitar player, and he's got this Telecaster line throughout the whole thing that just draws you right in. So when there's not a vocal line or a harmony line, you hear Dave's guitar, and it's a
Cool.
handoff between the voice and the guitar and the voice and the guitar, and it's just got a real driving beat. And
And you said it comes out Monday, so we can listen to it on Monday?
yep. And if you go
Awesome.
to my Bandcamp, you can buy it today as a pre-sale.
There you go. Is your Bandcamp link on your website?
It is. It is. Yep. If you go to doyleturner.com, then you can see that it says Bandcamp and you head right over there. Or if you're on Instagram, that little bio link tree has a
Cool.
connection to it. So,
And then I've got a little QR code on the screen too, so all you have to do is take a picture with your phone and it will take you there, so
thank
we're
you.
high tech around here, Doyle.
This is pretty fantastic.
We do have a question in the chat. Paul Beckerman has a really good question, and Paul's been on the show before too, so good morning, Paul.
Mhm.
He says, "What role does live performance play in your songwriting process?"
Well, Paul probably knows this better than anybody because he plays with the Sun Dogs, and he plays out quite a bit as well. And when I have something that I feel is worthy of playing out, then when I play it out, I pay attention to those parts of the song that either I'm nervous about delivering or singing any of those lyrics, or parts that I feel hesitant about, and I know that that's something I have to go back and redo, and make it smoother because there's something about that energy when you're up in front of people, and then that is kind of a good litmus test for me on whether the song is grown up or not.
I like that. I like that the term "grown up" because I think a lot of songwriters say, songs are kind of like our kids, right? Like,
Mhm.
some of them are really well behaved and some of them not so much.
Yeah. For sure. Jeff Tweedy says that, from Tweedy from Wilco talks about that. He says he just keeps creating. And when somebody says, hey, it's time to put an album together, he has to go and manage all these half dressed little children wandering around his studio and pick out the ones that he's going to, spiff up for the album. And I was just working on a song last night and this morning that I feel like it's finished, but it's also one that I just keep wanting to tinker with. And
Mm.
so, it's been kind of a difficult child.
There you go. DJ in the chat just says you're amazing. So I don't know if he's talking
Oh,
about you, me, or us. I think it's both of
probably
us.
both of us
Right.
together.
Yes. Thank you, DJ. Appreciate that. Paul had a follow-up question. He says, do you have an example of something that you've changed due to audience feedback? Like, do you remember playing a song and thinking, yeah, that one's going back?
Well, with Run a Little Faster, I've because it's been such a long production cycle with that. It's been almost 14 months, maybe close to 15 months, and
Oh,
that
wow.
feels like an eternity for me. I've been lucky. I've been able to record stuff fairly recent to when I've written it,
Yeah.
and so this felt like it needed a lot of patience. But whenever I played that one, I find that I am changing it to match and not lyrically so much as how the structure of the song is. I play it differently than we recorded it, just because it feels more natural. And so I there's certain beats that I've kind of taken out, and
Mm.
we've moved from one section faster. So we've run a little faster live.
There.
Yeah.
Hey, prosody. Um, so so wha so you said that, like, the production cycle for this has been 14 months? Like, that's
Mhm.
what, what's going on in those 14 months?
Well, the thing came together so quickly. We wrote it in January of 2022, and it came together very quickly because of Dave's production skills. And I remember having a conversation with somebody who I consider a mentor, and they had listened to it, and I said, "This feels like it's ready to go, except for this, this, and this." And that person said, "If you have those inklings now, follow that." And that's
Mm,
always been the training I've gotten from people that have helped me with recording, is that whenever you have that kind of, oh, this part right here, because I think if you let it go, it only continues to bug you more.
yeah,
And so what happened was, like I said, I was ready to release it like in February of 22. And then I thought, well, I want to take care of these little bits. And to be honest, nothing that Dave did was anything that we needed to redo. And nothing that Sarah did was anything needed to redo. It was me.
it was
It
all
was the
your
vocal
fault.
stuff. It was all my fault. But in the process, Dave changed over his DAW from one DAW to a different. And so getting the stems back from him was a long time frame, because he
Sure.
was on a different DAW and learning a whole new universe. And you know what that's like.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so then once we got it, we thought, oh, just a couple of quick brush ups. And pretty soon it was redoing the vocals, going through and EQing and making it just right. And I always like to take time. It doesn't seem like it with how often I record, but I do like to take a lot of time to listen. And so once we got it all ready to roll in November, then it was trying to figure out how I could best fit it into all the other projects so that
yeah.
I'm not just releasing and promoing on top of releasing and promoting.
Um, yeah, I mean, I think that's awesome. Thanks for that explanation because I think people listening would be like, 14 months, what happens in there, you know? Tom Sweeney, good morning, Tom. He has a good question. He says, "How many different songs are you working on at one time?" between like writing, revising, producing, etc.? Like, what does your plate look like, or do you have multiple plates?
I've got one plate. I write one thing at a time, and then I let it sit. And part of my process is that sitting and to see what floats up as being, because every song, and you guys know this, every song that you write is the best song that you've ever written, and you get so excited about it and you love it like a child. And you have, for me, I have to get some time. And so I've got a little 3-ring binder. I'm so old school. I've got a little 3-ring binder with all my lyrics and chords, and I date everything, and then I just wait to see what kind of floats up over the months. So I've got that sort of cycle. Once I pick something that's ready to record, then we record it, and then it's to the whims of the, you know, the timeline of the record and the project. And so there are some, I think 2 or 3 songs on the Treasures project that are about 2 years old. And so we're going through and how, you know, and it's a different focus at that time. At that time, I'm done editing lyrically. I'm done pretty much editing melodically. We're just going on production and trying to get a good take, a good performance and make it as good as we can get.
Yeah. It's interesting that you said you're someone who's in love with what you write when you first write it. I
Mhm.
talk to songwriters who are the opposite, where they almost always don't like what they write at first. Have you ever experienced that side of it too?
Definitely. And I think this is a real key. I've been thinking, I wish somebody, I had the good fortune to meet you early on in my songwriting. And we spent a day where you were able to do a workshop. And it was just like the light bulbs kept coming on and on for me. And it was really a powerful, powerful thing. But I wish somebody would have come alongside me early on and told me about bad songs, because I, for me, I'm always going to, I had to give myself permission to write bad songs. Um, and so when I finish, the joy is in finishing sometimes. And sometimes that's hard to discern between, oh, I'm happy about the song versus I'm happy about finishing. Um,
Interesting.
yeah.
Yeah.
So if somebody would have come alongside Doyle, 6, 7 years ago and said, just don't worry about writing bad stuff, that would have helped me, because my whole thing, and we've talked about this, is momentum. I need to keep writing. And that Pat Pattison idea of how big do you want your 10%? Because only 10% of your songs will be good songs. And how big do you want that 10%? 10% of 100 is 10. Well, now you've got 10 good songs. 10% of 1,000 is 100 good songs. And so
Yeah.
my thought is, I'm going to write and write and write, and hopefully that 10% increases numerically.
Yeah. People watching, write that down because that's such good advice.
Well,
Um,
and that's all Pat, right? You
well,
know that.
I know, but it's just I love hearing it too because it makes the critic in me sit down a little bit too
Mhm.
because, but I think what a really cool exercise is, though, is to sit down and try to force yourself to write a really bad song. Writing a really bad song is harder than you think it is.
Yeah?
Yeah, try it.
Well, I do it naturally, Chad. I don't need to try.
Yeah, it's just yeah, you're just a natural talent. I get it. I get it. Um, Chuck has a question. This is a good question too. He says, "I know you're active in a Facebook songwriting challenge group. Um, I can't see the thing. It says, do you find writing to prompts helps you with your songwriting in general?"
For me, it's not so much the prompt as it is the deadline.
Mm,
I'm very much motivated by deadlines and commitments. And in fact, I just started a Patreon page a couple months ago, and I don't have all of the fancy levels. It's really, you just kind of give what you want, join the community, and then my commitment to you is that I write you a song every month, and then a little newsletter, and do a YouTube broadcast, once a month. And so those commitments to me help me to write. In fact, that's what I was working on last night and today, and we talked a little bit before. And my commitment is to that write that Patreon song. And I know next week is going to be crazy with all this other stuff. So I was writing last night and this morning. And so to me, the prompts aren't so essential as the commitment. And then also with that songwriting group, and it's such a great group because anybody's welcome, and there's no songwriting police saying, "Oh, Doyle, you didn't get yours in, and so you're out." Or, and it's a very supportive group. You've written with that group.
Yeah.
Nobody's saying, well, you should work on that bridge because that really stinks. But to me, that community is also everything. I write because I want to make the deadline, and I want to make sure that I'm there because I want, I want Ted to hear me, and I want Sarah to hear me, and I want all these other folks, Christopher David Hansen, and I want to hear them. And my rule for that group is I don't listen until I finish my song, and so I can't get to the party unless I do the work.
Got it. Do
Yeah,
you do that because you don't want theirs to influence yours too, do you think? Or is it more just that kind of carrot at the end?
it's a
Which
lot, the
carrot
carrot.
carrot is the
It's
prompt
the
this
prompt this
week
time.
too.
Yeah, the carrot and the stick. No,
Yeah,
it's definitely the carrot because I wanna join the party. I
cool.
wanna be there and hear what other people have done because I get so inspired.
Yeah.
Um, you write something that's pretty decent, and then you feel like, oh, I've got this songwriting thing, and then you go hear somebody else, and you're like, whoa, I don't have the songwriting thing yet. It's a never ending. It's a
Yeah.
never ending goal to try and achieve, and people remind you of that because there's such fantastic writers. Emily Havik is somebody that, oh my gosh, everything she writes, I just go melty over because she's so good. She's so good,
She
and
is.
and
She's really good. Yeah.
there's so many people on that group that are like that. So,
Matthew French,
oh yeah,
Amanda B. Perry.
yeah.
Yeah. So Doyle, if someone's like, "What group is this?" How do people find it?
It's the Singer Songwriter Songwriting Challenge on Facebook, and it's open to everybody. When you find that page on Facebook, there will be a email to Laurel Hay, and she's kind of our grand marshal of that parade. And you email her, and she'll give you privileges so that you can post your video because that's the whole thing. You get the prompt. You get Now we're on the winter, so it's 2 weeks to finish the song, and then in those 2 weeks you have to record yourself a video of yourself performing the new song, and then you post it up there, and it's just fantastic.
Chuck says melty must be a Minnesotan term.
Yeah, we're definitely hoping for melty these days, Chuck. Well, we should ask where is Chuck because Chuck's everywhere.
Uh, Chuck, where are you right now? I think he's in, like, Virginia or West Virginia or somewhere in the mountains, like, he's on his songwriting, quest around the country, which is super cool.
That is, yeah. Every time I see him on the social media, I'm like, oh my gosh, I love that life. One
Yeah.
day I'm going to do that.
Jeanette has a really good question for you. She says, "How do you decide what song to work on first? Like, if you have, like, several melodies or several ideas, what do you work on first?" And before you answer that, Chuck said he's in Bristol, Tennessee. He's going to a
Ooh,
bluegrass jam today, which sounds super cool.
Tennessee is a great place for music. Um, yeah, I don't know if I'm really all that fussy about. I don't. I'll tell you this. It's Janet.
Jeanette.
Jeanette. I'll tell you this, Jeanette, with my writing, I don't come up with 6 or 7 melodies. I come up with one, and then I try it, and then chuck it, and then I come up with another, and try it, and chuck it. And so I'm kind of simple-minded that way, and I kind of wish that I had Jeanette's brain that she's able to come up with all these melodies.
Some people do think in melodies, right? Like, some people
Mhm.
have lyric ideas that come to them, other people have melody. Yeah, definitely. Um,
One of the things that you mentioned, I think, at one point was writing that chorus first and then
mhm,
writing your verses to the chorus. And I always keep that in the back of my mind. I don't always follow it, but
yeah.
that's something that I think might be helpful because your chorus needs to be kind of uh, catchy and strong, right?
Well, your chorus is the main point of the song, right? Like, that's
Hmm.
if you had to, like, that's the chorus is like the thesis. This is like, this is what the song is, and this is the point I'm making. So then you have to, then figure out in the verses, well, how did we get here, right? Like,
Hmm.
how do I have everything point to that? Um, which is not always easy. So I kinda go back and forth like you, like, I sometimes like to write a verse first and then think of, like, okay, what point, like, where does this lead to then? And then
Hmm.
it's sort of like the chorus is the payoff, but I also like to go the other way too because your chorus gives you so much, like, the chorus can set the motif of the song, it can
Yep.
set what the melodic things are doing. It can set what the so if you set a rhyme scheme in your verse, you know that you should probably do something different
Mhm.
in your chorus or in your the chorus or the verse should not have the same rhyme scheme. So like whatever you start with, do something different in the other
Mhm.
section, right? So yeah. Joe has a great kind of two-part question, and I actually wrote down these questions that I was going to ask you, Doyle, because I was curious how you would answer this. But what makes a song bad and what makes a song good?
This one is really simple for me, and it took me a long time to figure this out, but it's connection.
Mm,
If I perform a song, and getting back to what Paul was talking about, if I perform a song and it doesn't connect, yeah, it needs some work. It's not there yet. Also, for me to be a little bit more technical, if it doesn't have enough contrast,
mm,
I think that that can get it gets repetitive and boring for me. I don't want to mention real specifics, but we were watching a performance last night of some very, very young songwriters, and they've gotten a good share of attention, and a lot of their songs were similar, both from song to song, but also within the song. And I was just like, "Ooh, this isn't connecting with me."
mm.
But there were a lot of other people it connected with. So, but for me, contrast for sure.
Yeah. That's a really good, more objective thing because obviously the other night we had a workshop with at home songwriting, which, if you're interested in joining the meetup, it's a meetup group that we do. But I played the number one hot AC song. And then I also played the number one country song in the
Mhm,
country this week. And both songs, number one, right? Like the place where a lot of people aspire to. I know not everybody,
mhm,
but some people couldn't stand them and some people loved them, right? So
yeah,
good, bad is kind of a it really does come down to what moves you. I love that you said connection because a song could be quote unquote technically bad and still move people, right?
right. A friend of mine talks about the metaphor of songwriting being a lot like cooking.
Mm,
You can put in the flavors that you really like, and some people will like that, and some people are like, "No, I don't like curry," or "I don't like this particular spice." And I think that's true with frequencies. There are some people that really tend to like a lot of high frequencies.
mm,
I've got a Taylor guitar, which is, they're really bright. And a friend of mine, his partner, heard that guitar and she turned to him and said, "Why don't you have a guitar like that? That's the best sounding guitar ever." Well, I think people are gravitating towards certain frequencies. And it's like cooking. Nobody likes everything, right?
yeah.
And we get to have our personal preference, which is awesome.
I think for me, what makes a song good is it delivers an emotion in a very like unified way, right? Like everything sort of works together. It
Mhm,
doesn't sound like it's disjointed. It doesn't sound written. Like I think for me a bad song sounds like predictable rhymes where the we've talked about it a million times, the emphasis is on the wrong syllable. You know
yeah.
what I mean? Like um it's kinda like your name would be Doyle or Doyle Turner instead of Doyle Turner, like, those little things that sort of take you away from the message. I think a good song stops time for those 3 minutes, right? And you're somewhere
Mhm,
else because you're not thinking about it. Alls you're doing is listening, and it just becomes an emotional experience. And the thing is we can teach tools and techniques all day long, but just like cooking, you may have the same exact ingredients, but for some reason your pie doesn't turn out like somebody else's. So
mhm.
it's like we're all trying to cook towards that magic that just like happens. And I think to your point earlier where you said how big do you want your 10%? Some of it's not like you're not writing bad. You just haven't hit that right mix yet. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Exactly, and another friend of mine who's a mentor talks about how he said, "If I knew where the good songs were written, I'd go there every time." And he's a
Yeah.
really great songwriter, and, it's just, it's like fishing, you have to have your line in the water, and you have to cast, and you have to put bait on it and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I wanted to ask you and go back a little bit because you'd mentioned the power of the chorus. And
Yeah.
I've been doing a lot of writing lately where I don't feel the need to put in a bridge, because
Mhm.
whatever I said in the chorus feels like the emotional center, or the revelation, or the truth, the true part of it. And is that legal?
Yeah, it's more and more common now, actually. So that's one of the reasons why you see songs getting shorter is they're kind of chopping out bridges. So you'll see a lot of songs that are just over 2 minutes now. Um, and I think a lot of it is because they're cutting out bridges. And I think the job of the bridge is to take you somewhere different that you haven't been, and also
Mhm.
expand on the concept. So I've also heard of bridges being talked about as being a summarizing section.
Mm.
So it's almost like a second way to sort of summarize everything that's already been said, but in a very different way, because contrast is the name of the game with a
Yep.
bridge. It should not sound like anything else that you've heard in the song. But no, you don't have to have a bridge. So we're doing a March songwriting challenge for the meetup group, and we're doing
Mhm.
the listening event a week from today, actually April 1st. So there's still time to get songs in, but um, my song doesn't have a bridge, and I actually wrote one, but I just didn't feel like it added to the song, so I took it
Yeah.
out. So yeah.
That whole thing about the bridge throws me off, because I don't know if it was something that I learned in one of your workshops or not, but I'm out for a long time. I wrote three distinct motifs, or three distinct sections, and that
Mhm.
worked really well for me because I had a lot of contrast, and I made sure that they each sounded different. And so letting go of that has been a little shaky for me. But that's the other thing. If I had somebody could go back 6 years and tell Doyle what needed to be said, I would say that it's also it's get used to feeling that feeling of uncertainty, because
Yeah.
you're never going to get that stamp of approval that this is a perfect song. And it's a lot of, at least for me, it was a lot of coming to different forks in the road and going, oh, this or this or this, and try this and try that. And it's trial and error, is my biggest bread and butter.
I I totally agree with that, and I also think that writing a lot is the only way that you start to be able to self-diagnose.
Hmm.
Do you know what I mean? Like, and
Mhm.
what I mean by that is Doyle 5 years ago wouldn't be able to listen to a song like Doyle today and say, "I think something needs to change," because over those 5 years, you've had little incremental experience where you know what works and what doesn't, and you've trained your ear a little bit more. So I think
Mhm.
when newer songwriters get frustrated when they're like, "Oh, it's just not working," set that song aside, like write something else. And because I think you get so caught up in trying to perfect a song,
Mhm.
and what you really want to do is become better at writing, not to get a better
Yep.
song. You want to become a better songwriter, right? Because if you're a better songwriter, the
Yep.
quality of your songs is going to improve naturally. Does that make sense?
And oh, perfect sense, and it's so unsatisfying to hear as a newer songwriter, because you want the formula that's gonna lead you to the perfect song, and to hear that, while you have to learn to relish in the writing. I remember hearing that and really being like, it's so painful. Why would I what but also letting go of that idea of ideas
Yeah.
being precious, um, because there's always more.
Yeah.
There's always more. And when I realized that, and found that to be true, that there's always more ideas, then this one particular idea that I feel so strongly about, it's just
Yep.
an idea, right? And if it's good, it may come back, and it may not. That's okay. There's always more. The Beatles in their documentary talked about how they didn't have, phones to record things on. They didn't have um, ways to keep these ideas for songs, and they just said, well, if it wasn't a good song, it then if it was a good song, the idea would stick. They would remember
I
it.
disagree with that because
Um,
I've had some good
and
ideas that are gone. Sorry, Beatles.
but to me, that gives me comfort because
Yeah.
there's always more, right? If I didn't remember that perfect, that happened to me this morning when I was writing. I walked. This is how old I am. I walked from the door of the office over to the computer and grabbed the guitar, and I had this idea for this song that I was going to incorporate. And I was like, this is a step forward. Not, it's not, a giant leap, but it's a step forward. I want to explore this in my writing. Sat down, got to the keyboard, and I was
You're
like,
like, "Where
what
am
was that
I?"
idea again?
Um, no, and I also think for new people out there, there is no such thing as a make or break song. Like, there is like, I think some people think that this one song is their shot, right? And it doesn't work that way. The
Mhm.
best songwriters in Nashville, it's not about one song. It's about, can you keep coming up with songs and can you work well with others? Like, I think it comes down to quality of writing rather than quality of one song, if that makes sense. We have
I
Oh,
went
no,
to a, oh, go
just
ahead.
say
You
we'll
finish
go
then.
back to some questions once you say the next thing. This is great.
A year ago in January, I was able to go to Steve Seskin's songwriting
Awesome.
workshop at the Bluebird. And it was fantastic because there were 14 of us at the Bluebird, and Steve Seskin and these other Grammy nominated songwriters. And one of them was Jamie Floyd, and she has been in Nashville for 20 years, and she's been at it the whole time, and talked about writing 150, 170 songs a year, and how that she did a performance of one of her songs that she'd written on Wednesday, and this thing just blew me away. And she openly said, she said, this is my song, this is the song that's going to do it for me. And that song, I've never heard it again, right? I heard her
Yeah,
on other things later, and that song didn't come up. And maybe it is, maybe it's
right.
just in the process right now. But she was so excited that this was song, because she'd written it
Mm,
Wednesday, and it was a
yeah,
killer song, right? But I think you get so excited about the creative process, or I do at least, that they that those songs are, because it's the best feeling when you finish a song. It's
yeah,
like winning the lottery, right? If you said, Doyle, you can sell the song for $2 million, or you can give up that feeling. Oh, I'd
totally.
keep the feeling,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So
Yeah.
in the chat, Coco has says, any advice on adding dynamics to songwriting or songwriting and production as well? Thanks. So dynamics.
Well, hi, Coco. I think you've got the right guy on the line for the production side of things, because Chad knows what he's about with production. So, for dynamics, for me, I'm always just that back to contrast. If I'm singing something low in my verses, I'm going to try something high. Doug Milloway kind of taught me this, because I was working with him on some songs, and he was like, Doyle, every verse you sing the same. And I'm like, well, that's the melody. And he says, no, you need to vary it up, and that's always stuck with me. And so I would say, you're always, what's the rule you talked about? You do it twice and then you vary
Yeah,
it,
the
right?
rule of two, where it's like, if you do something twice, don't do it again until you do something else. Yeah.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah. What about the production side, Chad? Talk to that a bit, because you're a really amazing production person.
Yeah, so the way that listeners listen to songs, both from a production standpoint and a songwriting standpoint, is because the energy changes throughout, right? So in your song,
Hmm.
in songwriting, you start low with your verse, your pre-chorus goes up a little bit, right? And then you have this like climax at the chorus, and then it drops back down to the verse, builds its way back up. So that's your tension and release, right? So the song is doing this
Hmm.
kind of energy thing, but it's on the way up to the last like the last chorus, where it's kind of like that anthem thing. But from a production standpoint,
Hmm.
you also should be thinking about contrast, whereas what's happening with the instruments in each section, right? And with production, it's almost like a
Mhm.
cone that gets bigger as the song goes on, where the energy builds. So you start with less instruments in the
Mhm.
beginning, and then the most instruments and the most activity is at the end of the song. And what you're kind of doing is trying to figure out, how do I add something a little bit different for your listener's ear in every section? And
Mhm.
sometimes it's something as little as like a finger snap, right? Like it's something that
Yeah.
subconsciously your listener is getting new information. So it's not just having the same loop throughout the whole song. It's like, how do you build that energy?
Mhm.
Because that contrast and that energy is really what keeps that listener focused on the song and the production as well. And the thing is the production is the decoration on the tree, right? It's the frosting on the cake.
Yep.
Your song should be strong underneath the production, right? Like don't let production try to save a mediocre song, because it'll still be a mediocre song
Mhm.
that sounds clear. You know what I mean?
And a couple other ideas on production that sparked from what you were saying. The that idea of building, like you were saying, a cone shape. Also, I noticed that about three quarters of the way through, a lot of songs will drop all the production
Yep.
for a section. So it goes back to just the bare bones melody, bare bones whatever instrument is underneath,
Yep.
and then it goes back. Um, or sometimes it goes, to full production and then
Or do
it
you
comes down to
or you
nothing
hear a song
as a
really,
way to
really
handle
build up, and then it gets to the chorus and it goes and it opens up and it's still the chorus, but it has its own thing. Like, it's all about tension and release. That's what you're building. And that comes down to the concept of contrast, which is the question he's asking, is how do you add that in? I mean, with production, it's just
right.
adding and dropping parts. Maybe your verse only has drums and bass, and then in the chorus there's extra guitars and more rhythm stuff or something like that, if that makes sense.
The other thing that I've discovered, and it's not anything new, but is the fact that when you do song production, you can't have all beautiful. If you have too many, beautiful voices, beautiful instruments, it becomes too perfect, and so you need some kind of grit,
Yeah.
some kind of ugly, because a little bit of ugly in production makes it highlights and
Some Kinda
emphasizes the
Ugly is a
beautiful.
great song title.
Well, and that's why my wife and our marriage works so well, because you got a little bit of ugly and then you got beautiful.
I
She's
know,
she's
I
on
see
here,
she's commenting.
commenting. So
She asked about an example of falling in love with the newest baby, and then she also said, was it Jamie Floyd who you were talking about?
yeah, that was the, songwriter from Nashville that I'd referenced for sure. I also noticed that "Healing Under the Sun" is gonna take the $2,000,000 to create more feelings, and I love that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough choice, but what's funny, though, is I actually have seen some interviews with hit songwriters that say that getting that hit is not the same feeling as writing it, which is interesting.
Mhm. And also, Chris Stapleton and, what the fellow from, Dan Wilson, talked about there's no way of knowing. When you've completed a hit song, they've both done it, and they said there's no way of that they know that, "Oh, this is a
Mhm.
hit," when you walk out, because I think the feeling of creating something that wasn't there before is so euphoric that it's not there's nothing special about, "Oh, well, this one's gonna be a hit," because it's 2 different sides, right? Songwriting versus how it affects on a global level or a hit level, that's
Yeah, well, I
business, right?
think, with the thought of, not knowing if it's a hit, like, it's not all about the song either, because you have to have the artist has
Mhm,
to like it, it has to be in the voice of the artist, it has to fit whatever marketing plan that they have for the artist, like, it's not
mhm,
just the song, and that's why I've heard a lot of hit writers say too, like, you never know, because there's so many hurdles for a song to go through that,
mhm.
I mean, it's a miracle that songs actually make it that far, and it's hard to predict which ones are gonna do it.
Well, I read somewhere in the last month or 2 that said that, a national promotion campaign starts at about $1,000,000. and that's a
Right.
huge hurdle. You know? Yeah.
DJ has a kind of a two-part, question up here. Usually start with writing songs
Mhm.
with a melody and lyrics, um, that don't really mean anything. Sorry, I have
Mean
my
anything?
camera, like, where I can't read part of this, but after writing melodies and lyrics, I find it difficult to choose a specific key, and then, difficult to choose a specific key and chords that would fit the melody. Do you have any advice on, if you have a melody, how do you fit chords to it?
I, have struggled with this too because, was it a week ago? I woke up with a section of a melody, and it was a difficult thing for me because you think, "Oh, well, you got
Mhm.
manna from heaven," right? This idea. But it was difficult because getting from where, getting up and getting to where I can get to my phone and record it, it's always hard for me to match what I hear in my head vocally, especially in the morning or the middle of the night. And so, when I listen back to these little voice messages that I record on my phone, it sounds like, messages from Planet Madness because I'm it just is not there. It's not as beautiful as it is in your head
Yeah.
or as complete. And I don't the melody that I came up with, that was one of the biggest struggles, DJ, was figuring out how to do it with guitar and voice because I had it in my brain. The other thing that was kind of uh, a pitfall for me was it turned into a song that I really like. And granted, that song's a week and a half, 2 weeks old, so it's still in the baby stage. But it sounded to me like something that Christopher David Hansen would do, right? One of the
Mhm.
songwriters from our group. And so I posted it and then I didn't feel good about it. And I went and I just put under the post, I said, "Hey, Christopher David Hansen, if this is too much like what you've done, tell me. I'll take it down. I'll write another one." And he said, "Oh no, this is all yours. This is no big deal." But when you get those gifts
Yeah.
of those melodies, you automatically, and for me at least, I'm thinking of, "Oh, I've I've taken that from somewhere, I've heard that somewhere else." And that little game is
Yeah,
difficult for
so
me.
I'm gonna go a little bit more step by step technical on how to find chords for a
Mhm,
melody, um, because, I mean, I think we all struggle with it, and I do too, but some great advice that, and I don't know where I picked it up, maybe it's just my experience, but, um, if you have an instrument, so if you play piano or guitar, if you can at least find the first note of what melody you are
mhm,
singing, and then find the second note, and then maybe the third note, you can maybe get a sense for what key those notes are in. So that gives you a sense of, okay, those notes are showing up as like I'm singing a D, an E, and an F sharp. So you might be like, okay, that might be in D or it might be in A, right? So you have to know a
mhm.
little bit of theory, just enough to know what scales are, right? So then once you think like, okay, well that could be D, you know that, and I just got something in my eye. Um, like
Oh,
an
no.
eyelash just decided to flip out. Okay. Um, anyway, so if you know you're in D, right? The most powerful and stable chords from a major perspective are D, G, and A. The 1, 4, and the 5. So
1,
then
4,
you
and 5,
play the
yeah.
1 chord and sing your melody and see how that sounds. Does that sound right? Then you play the 4 chord and sing your melody. How does that sound with what you're playing? And then do that with the 5 as well, and then you're like, "Well, that sounds too happy." So then flip to the minors, right? And then try
Mhm,
the B minor, because if you're in D, B is the relative minor. So you play that, and then you play the E minor, and then you play the F sharp minor, and eventually you will find the chord that matches what's in your head, right? Um, if you're more
mhm,
experienced and read music and you're more of a composer, which is not what I am, um, you could learn to what they call reharmonize a melody, where you know that if you're singing an F sharp, what chords in the key have F sharp in it. And this is another way you can do it. You're like, okay, well, F sharp, that's in the chord of D. It's also in B, but it's also in the F sharp minor in that key, right? So that first note, you
mhm.
have 3 possible chords that note could be in, right? So I think the key to it is you have to land on a key, right? So I know you said that you're having trouble finding out what key it is. I think you have to just figure out the notes. And it's tough if you're not a musician. That's going to be a challenge, right? I don't know if there is a way to do it without an instrument or without something that plays chords. Hopefully that's helpful. I don't know if that is. I know Doyle's making a confused face.
That's my normal face.
That's right. That's your
That's
RBF.
just
That's
how I
what it
look.
is.
Resting
Yeah. So
confused
DJ
face
says actually
syndrome.
what he
Yes.
means is how to create specific emotions with chord progressions. Okay, so that's a different question. So Doyle, how would you answer that one?
Well, I was going to defer to you because this is
Yeah.
something that's right up your alley. The major 145 is going to be more of a happy, I think. Anytime you want to insert sad, like I do a lot, you put in some
Yep.
minor chords for sure. And I am so not theory based. I was a music minor, but I'm just, for me, I've been working on incorporating play into my songwriting, where I treat it like a sandbox, and I'm just trying different sounds and notes and that sort of thing. And so I will land on the mood of the song, whatever strikes the mood I'm feeling or working from, by experiential, guess and test. Now you tell them how it should
Well,
go.
I mean, honestly, there isn't a this is what you do and this works every time. It really is experimentation and to see what is delivering the emotion that you want to deliver. I would say that and I see that DJ says he's a musician, so awesome. Um
Good.
the way that I particularly learned it was I would listen to other songs, that have an emotion that I was trying to communicate, right? And I would listen to,
Mhm.
um, you know, "I Can't Make You Love Me If You Don't," right? That's
Mhm.
and I know that song didn't start the way that it ended up, but the way that it was written as a hit was a very pretty ballad. It had sort of this longing, it had this
Yeah.
thing to it. So I think if you if you want that emotion, then you do something like that song, right? And the easiest way to
Mhm.
practice is steal that chord progression because nobody owns chords, right? And I think that's where the guess
Mhm.
and test comes in. And Paul says he likes the guess and test the concept. Um
Well, I think he's was a math teacher at one point, maybe. So I think that would be
there
right
you
up his
go.
alley.
Um But do you know what I'm saying? So I think it's like you said, it's really
Mhm.
experimenting with what emotion does this sound like or what emotion does this give me because there's such a spectrum. Do you know what I mean? Because you have your major key which sounds a certain way. You have your minor key which sounds a certain way. You have chords like minor sevens that sound different than a 7 chord. Paul was an English teacher, he said.
Oh, well, that's why I like him so well. I'm
There
an
you
English
go.
teacher too.
So but from a chord perspective, I think that's, because I was thinking about this the other day. It's like, how would I teach someone who's super new to this? How do you, it's like you imitate first, right? And then
Mhm.
you sort of build that vocabulary in your own mind. Like, I know if I want to write like a funk song and I want something that sounds very like Prince or Janet Jackson, like I'm probably going to play in a minor key and I'm probably going to like build a lot off a bass line instead of a chord progression, right? Like I know
Right.
that because I've studied the songs that do that or that work, and if you want to learn how to write a sad song, I think you have to study sad songs. Um and nothing
Mhm.
nothing is created in a vacuum, so you're not going to be original. And I think that you will hurt
Yeah.
yourself if you worry about sounding like other songs. It doesn't matter at this stage. Do you know what I mean? Like
Right.
just learn how to do it, and that I think is the guess and test, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and Paul will appreciate this because he's probably taught his students this as well. But anybody who talks about writing in general, just writing
Yeah.
prose or poetry, says half of the battle or half of the process is that you're a reader. In order to be a writer, you need to be reading. So if you're going to songwrite, you need to be listening. And I think that's
It
pretty key.
do you
I I, I want to go ahead.
I
I got one other thing.
I just wanna say that about the listening thing, I can tell when I listen to a songwriter that doesn't listen to much because their
Hmm.
songs don't have the same depth. Like, there's just something that it's almost like they just know the building blocks, but haven't heard how other people have effectively incorporated it. That's all I wanna say.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, and I was gonna reveal my secret to, finding
Mm,
mood, right? I took a songwriting lesson 4 years ago from a local fellow who is a songwriter, and, he basically wrote out a chart that I believe is called
yeah,
the circle of fifths. Um, okay? So, in the key of A, here's all the chords
yep,
that will work, right? In the key of A. And you said, step one, find the chord that sounds right for you. So let's go through the chords. Which one feels right? And then go to the next chord in that line. And then does that feel like what you're trying to get at? If it doesn't, try the next chord. Try the next chord. And it's back to how I'm pretty simplistic where it's just like, well, you go from one to the next until you find the one that feels right.
I think that's true, right? And I was just trying to, pull up the circle of fifths here. Let's see if this will let me do it.
While you're doing that, oh, there you go.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, so what Doyle's talking about is when you pick a key on the circle of fifths, and I just Googled this quick. This is the first one that comes up. But let's say you're in the key of C, right? So pick C. That's the key of no sharps, no flats. So for those of you who are piano players, it's no black keys. So you don't have to worry about any of the black keys. C is your one chord, that's your tonic. And then the six chords that basically work in that key surround it. So you have the chords on each side of it, and then the three chords that are under those chords. Those are the major chords of the key, and these are the minor chords of the key. So your relative minor of C is A minor. Your four is on the left here, so that's your F chord, and then your five is the G, and then this is the two, the six, and the three when we're talking about like Nashville number system. But if you're writing in the key of C,
Mhm.
those six chords, you can write a lot of dang good songs with only knowing the chords that work within any given key. And I think that's what your teacher was kind of telling you, Doyle, was like you don't have to sit down and look at the guitar and think like all the tons of different combinations you have. You really only have to memorize about six chords at the most, and you are in pretty good shape, right?
Right. So I keep that little paper that I got from him, because he drew it out in a grid, not a circle. And I keep
It's
that
the
with me in
grid
my
of
guitar
grid of
case.
fifths.
And I the grid of fifths,
Yeah.
the fifth grid, yes, which is just a little
Yeah.
bit higher than the fourth grid. But I keep that with me, and I use that, and I feel sometimes like I'm back to being a starter singer songwriter, but it's the truth. I can find what matches my emotion that way.
So Joe has a question. He says, "What's opinion of rap?" Which, in his opinion, has basically one melody or one beat, so it's mostly lyric driven, and melody is mostly irrelevant. Um, I think I can answer this one, and then Doyle, you can kind of talk about it.
Yeah, I've got a
So
response too.
melody. So the thing about melody is there's two parts to it. It's rhythm and it's pitch. And the thing that people always think about most with melody is that melody comes from the pitches, but in reality, a melody and a melodic motif actually comes from the rhythm of the pitches. And in rap music or rap songs, they do have a melody. It just doesn't have the same use of pitch that another genre would have. So they are creating contrast and prosody through the rhythm of the delivery of the lyric, and the rhythm tracks in a rap song, like the beat and kind of what's happening musically, is basically just a kind of a subtitle to what's happening from a lyric perspective. And the other thing to think about with
Mhm.
genre is each genre asks you for a different type of investment. And what I mean by that is singer-songwriter songs ask you to invest your mind and your heart, right? You listen to the lyric and you feel it. Dance music asks you to invest physically into the song because it wants your body moving, it wants your foot tapping, it wants you physically invested in the song. You're not as logically invested, so dance music is less complicated than singer-songwriter music is because dance music is not supposed to make your brain work, it's supposed to make your booty shake, right? So
Mhm.
that's the thing with rap music is it's not meant to accomplish the same investment that a singer-songwriter song does, but it still has the power to deliver on a message and an emotion. So it's still accomplishing an experience for the
Mhm.
listener, but it's doing it through a different type of investment. And rap music from the rhythm side is very melodic. It just they don't vary the pitch as much as other genres, if that makes sense.
And I work with a lot of youth that that's their favorite form, and it has been for 15 years, pretty consistent to the age group I work with, and they talk about how it does connect because that's my story. That's they're saying things that are true to me, and so there is a lyric meaning element to it. But I also have great respect for if you listen to most rap, they are playing with rhythm in so many different ways that I never get to explore in the genre that I end up writing in. And so it goes back to that whole thing of if you're going to be a songwriter, you need
Yeah.
to listen to music. And so when I do my I'm a morning pages guy, and so when I do my morning pages, I don't want any lyrics because that distracts me from what I'm saying. But I will listen to anything, right?
Mm.
Jazz or fusion, or and really what I'm doing is I'm loading my brain with ideas, right? So I can think outside of my regular. Because I was thinking about this earlier in the week, how really the songs that are singer songwriter songs they're in such a narrow lane
Mhm.
in a lot of ways, because you have to have verses that build to the chorus, and the bridge will take you somewhere different, and it's almost even the melodies that you use and the rhythms that you use are so rooted in blues or folk or that sort of thing that your idea of, well, there's really no new ideas. It's true. And so I always try and think of what can I listen to that might get me out of my lane a little bit, because then if I bring something like that to a song, then it feels
Yeah,
fresh,
I think
right?
listening to genres that you don't normally listen to is a great way to remind yourself that the world of music is larger than we sometimes think it is, because if I listen to a
Mhm.
certain genre too much, I start to think that music is only this, but then I listen to something else and I'll
Yep.
hear something that just blows my mind, right? And then it's like, how do I incorporate that into
Mhm.
what I'm doing? And that's where I think the growth comes from. So even listen to genres you don't like
Yeah.
because someone likes it
Mhm.
and maybe, and you don't have to like it, but you can learn from it. That's kind of what I think. Chuck has a question. It says, what if I,
Oh, I thought you were avoiding this little trap.
oh, well, I'm used to Chuck Trap, so it's okay. He says, "What if I don't know chords? Does that mean I'll never be a good songwriter?" And the answer is no, right? Like, you can write a song, and Chuck, you write songs where you write lyrics. Chuck is a very good lyric writer, um, and he can come up with melodies, right? That is a song. But if Chuck wants to have someone record it, if he's not playing the chords and singing, someone else needs to, right? So that doesn't mean you're not a good
Mhm.
songwriter, Chuck. It just means that you would need to bring in someone else. to get it to a, like, releasable form. And I don't releasable is not the right way to say it, but Chuck, as you know, as you're traveling around the country, you're giving these performers a song that you write that's lyrics and a melody, and then they're coming up with kind of they're basically harmonizing your melody is what they're doing. They're not really necessarily writing the song with you, but they're putting it in a form that can be performed, right? They're doing their cover of the song. Um, Technically, if you're only writing words, you are a lyricist, right? And lyrics are part of a full song, but usually a full song is words, melody, harmony, and then some form of like rhythm pattern. Um, but no, I don't. I and Doyle, what do you think on this one?
I think that you answered it really, really well. Because if you think about a lot of American music, is rooted in just
Right?
a cappella, right? I'm thinking of field songs where you sang to pass the time and maybe to do something in a
Yep.
rhythm with other folks, and those are songs. That's one note at a time, and it's
Yeah.
still a song. So yeah, I think you answered it
I
really, really
think what
well.
Chuck is saying though is, a lot of people, how your songwriter teacher Doyle said, start with chords, right? Like if you want to learn how to write songs, start with
Yeah.
chords. I think the reason why people say to do that is because a chord gives you melody options, right? If you've never
Hmm.
come up with a melody before, or you're not as familiar with like how to write songs, because I think Chuck would admit too, like the more you do it, the better you get. So if someone's starting at ground zero, a chord instantly gives you, well, you could try one of three notes, right? If you're playing a triad, you could really start on one of three notes. So it's a starting point, right? And I think that's where the chord comes in for a lot of us, is it's where the melody is born from. If you can birth a melody, God bless you, because that's not how I started writing. Do you know what I mean? Like I didn't
Right.
it took a long time for me to learn how to write melodies. And writing melodies now,
Mhm.
it's easy in the sense that I can come up with something, but is it good or not? Or is it
Right.
what it could be or not?
To piggyback on what you were saying there about the chords being the basis for melody, I was the song that I just finished, or think I finished. Um, I had a choice of using an E7 chord or a D minor, and I chose the D minor because it gave me a different way to go with the melody, in something that sounded maybe original to me or something I
Yeah.
hadn't heard before. And so, yeah, it's just like huge, and it's so funny because when you play the progression with one versus the other, it's like, maybe it's not a big deal, right? But when you sing to it, and it gives you more melodic options for sure.
There is a video, and you would have to find it on YouTube. I don't have the link pulled up, but Scarlett Keys, who is a, teacher for Berklee College of Music, she has a whole series on writing chords to melody and how, just changing, like you said, from an E minor to like a D minor, like just one, like it can
Mhm.
completely change the emotion that you're communicating. And it's very subtle
Yeah.
sometimes, but yeah, think of chords, your melody. I like to think of it this way. So think of a live theater, right? Like an actor performing
Mhm.
performing actor. The lyrics are the lines, the script, the melody is the actor, and then the chords are the lighting.
Mm.
So the chords set the
Yeah.
mood of where things are being performed. And I like to think of the actor analogy because if you have good lines, but you have a bad actor, it doesn't come out right, right? So if you have really good lyrics, but your melody kind of sucks, it's going to be like watching a bad actor. And I always think about that. Like
Mhm.
everything has to work together to deliver the emotion that you want it to. And Chuck, take a drink because that's called prosody. Chuck has a drinking game that every time I say prosody, he takes a drink,
That's
and he's
awesome.
ended up in the hospital a few times because I say prosody so much, so
That's fantastic.
But yeah,
Oh.
I totally lost where we were going with that, but that's
Oh, we were just talking about
yeah,
chords and melodic structure, and and I was gonna say that, it's so good to talk to you because a lot of the times when I hear you talk, I think back to these notebooks I've got down here next to me that are filled with my notes from, your workshops, and it's always good to hear that again to reinforce, because a lot of times you go by feel,
yeah.
or I do, and so then you go back and you say, "Oh, well, this is where I got this tendency, and this is why I do this." So it's really I
Well,
enjoy
thank you.
talking with you.
I have so it's funny because I teach a lot of techniques and concepts, right? And I think people sometimes
Mhm,
misinterpret that as like a formula. And really
mhm,
what I'm trying to get across is like still write from that feeling place, right? Like don't ignore the inspiration or stuff that just comes out because there's magic that happens in that. But a lot of
yeah,
times that magic only gets us like 60% of the way there, right? Because then we're like, well, now what do I do
right.
with this? This is a pretty little, you know, it's like this is a nice looking chicken strip. I need the ranch dressing to dip it in. Do you know what I'm saying? Like the craft is the ranch dressing.
Yeah, yeah. Which I think is, hats and T-shirts. I think that's gonna be
Yes.
the
Yeah.
next thing. But to circle back to what you're talking about with prosody, and I wanted to say
There you
that
go.
word again just for Chuck, um, but with your analogy about the actors and the stage and the script and the lighting and all that kind of stuff, that's also called serving the
Yes.
song, right? Um, you make the choices that are going to serve this song that's going to connect in a certain way emotionally with or intellectually too with your listener. And so if you've got a bad actor, you got to figure something out because that's not serving the song. Here's what the song wants to do. Yeah, all of those elements. I thought that was a really good analogy.
So one of the questions I had written down for you, Doyle, as kind of a conversation starter if we needed it. Um, what do you look for in co-writers?
I'm looking for yes and the rule of improv, right? And I didn't know this until I started co-writing with Ted Heineshevitz. He and I, well, we're similar in so many ways. Sometimes he says we're the same person, and I sometimes agree with that. But the fact that when we write, there's no no's. So if I come in with this lyric, even if it's subpar, he's like, yes, and we go on to the next thing. And so there's that energy and that momentum, and it's fun to write that way. I have been in co-writes where it has
Mhm.
not been fun, and I'm like, well, what are we doing? Right? We need to both have an energy and some kind of excitement about what we're doing, or we're going to get a song that's crummy. And I can do a crummy song on my own.
Yeah. So I love the yes and thing because I think I have had co-writes where literally I am inside almost like dying for it to be over with, right? Like,
Yeah,
can we just do
yeah,
like, and literally I've sat there for 3 hours and we don't even have like a first line, right? The yes and
yeah.
get you going to where you have something that you can actually judge, right? I think the problem is when you get with a co-writer that judges in the beginning, you know what I mean? And
Mhm.
I think with the co-writing thing, that's where you have to sort of put aside the idea of like the result doesn't matter, right? Don't you think? Like, do you and
Mhm.
Ted get together and say we need to write a really freaking damn good song, right?
No, no. And we've written our share that will never see the light of day, just like my regular writing. This yes and also leads back to this idea of ideas
Yeah.
not being precious. Because if you and I do a co-write and you take it in a direction that I'm just like inside going, absolutely not. We're losing ground here. I have to
Yeah.
let it go because I need to follow the energy that you're putting into it because you may have an idea, or you will have an idea that's different than me. And that's the beauty of co-writing is that I learn when I co-write with somebody who thinks differently than me, and we come up with something that I wouldn't have expected. So letting go of that idea of that ideas are precious, that was a huge thing for me with co-writing. But that all being said, I've been really picky lately because I think I'm getting to be um, grumpy old man, stay off my lawn with
And
co-writing.
like, why do you say that? What does that mean?
I It's so fun to indulge myself and follow my ideas that I haven't had the energy or time to do a lot of co-writing where I can do that give that
Yeah.
yes and
Yeah.
energy. Um, uh, because I've had a few that crashed and burned, and one it crashed and burned when we were 98% of the way there. I had something that I thought was decent, and I got a breakup call over Zoom from my co-writer. I don't think this is working, and I'm like, well, what do we do with what we did?
Yeah. I mean, what's interesting, Doyle, is, so in a little over a week, I'm gonna be going to an Andrea Stolpe, like, a week-long songwriting retreat in the Catskills. Um, I'm
Oh, good for
actually anxious
you.
because I'm not a huge co-writer, and most of the week is gonna be co-writing with
Mhm.
strangers, so I'm going into it with the yes and mindset, and I'm going into it to learn and kind of go in as a student, and I honestly could care less what the
Mhm.
songs end up being, and I have a feeling that there's gonna be some
Yeah,
people that go in trying to prove something and trying to, like,
yeah,
show off, and, like, I'm just gonna let them if they want
mhm,
that, they can have it, that's not gonna be me, you know what I mean? Like, I know I can write a song, and I'm good, let's just do
yeah.
the yes and thing, you know?
That's really healthy way to approach it, and I'm so jealous you get to go to a week-long deal like that, and I wanted to acknowledge what
Yeah,
Paul's saying in the chat. I think that's true. I think the more, experience that you have writing songs, the more apt you are to say, that each idea is not as precious as because when my first 5 songs, those ideas were precious. I wouldn't let go of any of them, and so I wasn't a good
yeah.
co-writer at that point.
Tom Sweeney did some looking for us on the Scarlet Key stuff. She does a melody harmony and rhythm series, on YouTube, and he says there's
Ooh,
24 videos. So, um, Scarlett, like I
awesome.
said, she's a professor at Berklee College of Music, which, um, I love them.
Well, and
I
aren't you
am.
teaching a class for them?
Starting April 3rd, I will be teaching lyric writing, online for them. So,
Congratulations. That is so cool, and I think that Berkeley got the right
well,
person
thank
for
you.
certain.
Um, So Doyle, back to talking about kind of your projects and like writing with Ted and like you said the International Treasures, the album's almost done.
The album's, almost ready to be mastered. We'll see how it goes with mixing today, and then, we're gonna leave some time to listen
Yeah,
because that's so huge. Um, and then, we're also leaving time for the promotion cycle, which is this is only my second this single is my second time through the promotion cycle on a little bit grander scale. Um, because before all I would do is post a picture in it on YouTube and say or Facebook and say, "Oh, it's done.
yeah, like listen to it.
Call me." Yeah, yeah, check it out. And it wasn't as effective as I thought. So the promotion cycle is something that is a bear that I'm still trying to figure out. And we're leaving time for that. And Ted's got more experience with that, but we want to leave time so that we can do it correctly and do it upright. So yeah, the Treasures album was recorded in a Quonset hut in St. Joseph. It went against everything that I had learned as a recording person, where you record and track everything individually, and you make sure it's perfect and to a click, and all of that kind of stuff. And Ted said, "Oh, we're going to try something different. We're going to do it all live
Cool.
off the floor in this Quonset hut." And my friend and engineer Troy Foss from Supple Studios said, "No, you realize," he said, for the very first call, he said, "You realize we're leaning into the bleed. There's no going back and fixing and making perfect." He says, everything's going to
Yep.
bleed into everything else. And I was very terrified by that. But I also think as an artist, I'm learning that you have to be okay with that level of uncertainty. That feeling of falling is something that I run up against again and again and again. And old Doyle would have run away and hidden. And I find that hiding is not as possible doing what I'm doing. And I think that's good growth for me. So we did this live off the floor stuff, and I have to tell you that there were moments where it felt like flying. There were moments that it was the sweetest memory that I'll ever have recording anything. Being, just with in this space with people that I loved and trusted, and giving this performance that I would have gotten
Yeah.
in a vocal booth. And so it's a really cool, like a left turn from what we've been doing normally. And I think it's something that goes against the grain of high end production recording, because it's more organic. I think back to those 70s albums where it was kind of like, oh, we're going to get and do this together. And because they didn't have all of the computers and the ways of doing things
Right.
digitally. And so it's really exciting because I feel like that energy we found in that space is going to translate to the recording. And I also it's like we're leaving in count-ins on
Yeah.
some of the songs, and there's banter that happened after the song, and all of that kind of stuff is going to give it a more organic feel, and something I think that will hit differently than what's being produced now, or what
Yeah,
I'm aware
Prince
of
would have
anyway.
called that real music by real musicians. That's what
Ooh,
he liked. So he always tried to track as much as he could live with bands and stuff like that too. Yeah. Yeah.
really?
But
Oh, that's
there
awesome.
is
That's
magic
really
that you
cool.
cannot get by overdubbing when you are all recording in the same room.
Mhm.
Like, the bleed creates magic stuff too. Paul Beckerman says it sounds like, the White Stripes. He says Stipes, but that's their step brothers band. But,
Well, that's
right,
if the
it's
guy
the
from
White
REM is
Stipe.
heading
He is a
heading
White
that note,
Stipe.
right? Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, you and I are a bad combination. We
I
follow one another
know.
down the rabbit hole.
Oh my goodness. No, I mean, someday I'd love to get you and Ted on at the same time, and maybe, like, somebody like Paul too, like, people that, do that live music,
Yeah.
because, like, I'm such a, I mean, I do pop music and I do electronic stuff, so I produce my own music, which
Mhm.
I love that stuff, but I also love
Right.
hearing a recording of, like, live stuff too. Like, there's, like, and I think it's because I can't play it. Like, I can't play acoustic guitar, and I can't play mandolins or violins
Mhm.
or fiddles or what. Do you know what I mean? So hearing that magic of, like,
Yeah.
an actual band playing it is just, you can't recreate that. Yet.
Yeah. It's something that, is just, it's so that room was so warm and organic, and it felt like it was just genuine and real. And that really affected how we delivered those songs. We listened back and we're just like, even before we started mixing it, we're like, this is good. This is we you almost felt like you could master it and be done. But um, it's really exciting. We're going to have a release show at the Parkway Theater in Minneapolis on the 17th
Cool.
of September. And so you guys are all welcome. Anybody who's Minneapolis based, come on out. I love this because I did a release show on the 17th of
Yeah.
September up in Bemidji at the Chief Theater, which is like almost a carbon copy of the Parkway. And we had a great time. Ted was there, but this show at the Parkway is scaring the pants off of him because it's a lot of people. There's a lot of seats, so I think that's fun when I can
Yeah.
scare Ted a little bit too.
Chuck says it was a great chat. He says good luck with songwriting and all of that stuff. So thanks, Chuck.
Oh, thank you, Chuck. Good luck and I'm totally jealous of what you're doing too. Is one day I'm going to grow up and be
There you
like
go.
Chuck.
So yeah, so I think we'll probably start wrapping things up here this morning. But Doyle, this has been awesome to have you on, and we've had some great questions, great conversation. get together and do it again. And just a
Oh, for
reminder that
sure.
if you do want to check out Doyle's music, it's doyleturnermusic.com. Oh, just Doyle Turner.
DoyleTurner.com. I got the I've got the whole
Got it.
whatever it
So
is.
yeah, so
Yeah.
doyleturner.com, or you can use the QR code here on your screen as well. And then also don't forget that the International Treasures, Doyle and Ted, will be performing at the Astor Cafe on March 30th, opening up for Amanda B. Perry. And I just had a flashback of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. So it's like Doyle and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
It's absolutely true. And one of our greatest gifts is we can come up with album titles. We have 20 album titles and we've only got one
Hey,
album,
is
so we've
that in
gotta
your
get busy.
contract? You got a 20 album contract? Just
Yeah, with Ted though.
Yeah,
It's
but
between
Ted writes
us.
a lot, so you guys could do it. You guys can do it.
We've gotta have
Yes.
#life goals,
Well,
right?
Doyle, thank you so much, and everybody, thanks for watching here today. We're gonna wrap it up, and check out Doyle's music. Also, if you want to join the live meetups that we do with at home songwriting, definitely check out the links. And if you like this merch, check out the store on my YouTube channel. Get your at home songwriter merch too. So, thanks again, Doyle. Have a good rest of the weekend.
Oh, it's always a pleasure, and I always leave feeling we need to talk more, so
Awesome.
thank you
And
so much,
everybody else,
Ted.
have a great weekend, and we'll see you soon.